You are listening to Wings of Fire, an autobiography of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, narrated by yours very own boy, Akarsha. I am a well in this great land, looking at its millions of boys and girls to draw from me the inexhaustible divinity and spread His grace everywhere as does the water drawn from a well. This is my story. The story of the son of Abdul and Asha Ma. The story of a lad who sold newspapers to help his brother. The story of a pupil reared by Shiva Subramanya Iyer and Ayadurai Solomon. The story of a student taught by teachers like Pandalai. The story of an engineer spotted by MGK Menon and groomed by the legendary Professor Vikram Sarabhai. The story of a scientist tested by failures and setbacks. The story of a leader supported by a large team of brilliant and dedicated professionals. This story will end with me, for I have no belongings in the worldly sense. I have acquired nothing, built nothing, possessed nothing. No family, sons, daughters. I do not wish to set myself up as an example to others, but I believe that a few readers may draw inspiration and come to experience that ultimate satisfaction which can only be found in the life of the Spirit. God's providence is your inheritance. The bloodline of my great-grandfather Abdul, my grandfather Pakir, and my father Abdin may end with Abdul Kalam, but his grace will never cease, for it is eternal. I was born into a middle-class Tamil family in the island town of Rameshwaram in the erstwhile Madras state. My father Abdin had neither much formal education nor much wealth. Despite these disadvantages, he possessed great innate wisdom and a true generosity of spirit. He had an ideal helpmate in my mother Asha Ma. My parents were widely regarded as an ideal couple. I was one of many children, a short boy with rather undistinguished looks, born to a tall and handsome parents. We lived in our ancestral house, which was built in the middle of 19th century. It was a fairly large Pakka house made up of limestone and brick on the Mask Street in Rameshwaram. My austere father used to avoid all inessential comforts and luxuries. However, all necessities were provided for in terms of food, medicine, or clothes. In fact, I would say mine was a very secure childhood, both materially and emotionally. The famous Shiva temple, which made Rameshwaram so sacred to pilgrims, was about a 10-minute walk from our house. Our locality was predominantly Muslim, but there were quite a few Hindu families too, living amicably with their Muslim neighbors.
ಜುಗಾದ ಸೂಜು ಮಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಮಾದೇವ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಂಡೆ ಮ್ಯಾಲೆ ತುಂಡು ಮಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಅಂದಾವರೆ ಮುಂದಾವರೆ ಮತ್ತೆ ತಾವರೆ ಪುಷ್ಪ ಚಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾಲೆ ಬಿಲ್ಪತ್ರೆ ಮಾದೇವ ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಚಂದಕ್ಕೆ ಮಾಲೆ ಬಿಲ್ಪತ್ರೆ ತುಳಸಿ ದಳವ ಮಾದಪ್ಪನ ಪೂಜೆಗೆ ಬಂದು ಮಾದೇವ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಸೋಜುಗಾದ ಸೂಜು ಮಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಮಾದೇವ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಂಡೆ ಮ್ಯಾಲೆ ದುಂದು ಮಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಸೋಜುಗಾದ ಸೂಜು ಮಲ್ಲಿಗೆ ಮಾದೇವ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮಂಡೆ ಮ್ಯಾಲೆ ದುಂದು ಮಲ್ಲಿಗೆ
There was a very old mosque in our locality where my father would take me for evening prayers. I had not the faintest idea of the meaning of Arabic prayers chanted, but I was totally convinced that they reached God.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Hayya ala as-salah.
When my father came out of the mosque after prayers, people of different religions would be sitting outside waiting for him. Many of them offered bowls of water to my father, who would dip his fingertips in them and say a prayer. This water was then carried home for invalids. I also remember people visiting our home to offer thanks after being cured. My father always smiled and asked them to thank Allah, the benevolent and merciful. The high priest of Rameshwaram temple, Pakshi Lakshmana Shastri, was a very close friend of my father's. One of the most vivid memories of my early childhood is of the two men, each in his traditional attire, discussing spiritual matters. When I was old enough to ask questions, I asked my father about the relevance of prayer. My father told me there was nothing mysterious about prayer. Rather, prayer made a possible communion, a communion of the spirit between people. When you pray, he said, you transcend your body and become a part of the cosmos, which knows no division of wealth, age, caste, or creed. My father could convey complex spiritual concepts in a very simple, down to earth Tamil. He once told me, in his own time, in his own place, in what he really is, and in the stage he has reached. Good or bad, every human being is specific element within the whole of manifest divine being. So why be afraid of difficulties, suffering and problems? When trouble comes, try to understand the relevance of your sufferings. Adversity always presents opportunity for introspection. Why don't you say this to the people who come to you for help and advice? I asked my father. He put his hands on my shoulder and looked straight into my eyes. For quite some time he said nothing, as if he was judging my capacity to comprehend his words. Then he answered in a low, deep voice. His answers filled me with a strange energy of enthusiasm. Whenever human beings find themselves alone, as a natural reaction, they start looking for company. Whenever they reach an impasse, they look to someone to show them the way out. Every recurrent anguish, longing, and desire finds its own special helper. For the people who come to me in distress, I am but a go-between in their effort to propitiate demonic forces with prayers and offerings. This is not a correct approach at all and should never be followed. One must understand the difference between a fear-ridden vision of destiny and the vision that enables us to seek the enemy of fulfillment within ourselves. I remember my father starting his day at 4 a.m. by reading the namaz before dawn. After the namaz, he used to walk down to a small coconut grove we owned about 4 miles from our home. He would return with about a dozen of coconuts tied together, thrown over his shoulder, and only then would he have his breakfast. This remained his routine even when he was in his late 60s. I have throughout my life tried to emulate my father in my own world of science and technology. I have endeavored to understand the fundamental truths revealed to me by my father and feel convinced that there exists a divine power that can lift one up from confusion, misery, melancholy, and failure, and guide one to one's true place. And once an individual severs his emotional and physical bondage, he is on the road to freedom, happiness, and peace of mind. You are listening to Wings of Fire, an autobiography of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, narrated by yours very own boy, Akarsha.